In the quiet, cinnamon-scented air of the Morning Brew Café, a story began to unfold. Not with the crash of glass or the roar of raised voices, but with the quiet hiss of hot coffee soaking into a beige blouse. Sometimes cruelty doesn't come as violence. Sometimes it arrives as arrogance disguised as authority. Welcome to Life in Frames. The Morning Brew wasn't a special place to outsiders. It was narrow, with sun-washed windows and faded photographs of Ridgeway's history lining its walls. But to the people who gathered there, it was the heart of the town. Farmers came in before dawn, their boots still dusted with earth. Shopkeepers dropped by mid-morning, and for years, the second booth on the left belonged to Eleanor Hall. Eleanor was no celebrity, no town official, just a retired teacher with silver hair and a quiet smile. To her students, she had once been the firm but fair presence who taught them discipline and kindness. To her grandchildren, she was the warm embrace that smelled faintly of lavender. To Ridgeway, she was a piece of living history. Every morning, without fail, she sat in that booth, ordered a cup of black coffee, and read the local paper. But on this Wednesday her ritual was interrupted. Deputy Ben Carter pushed through the cafe's door, the weight of his badge preceding him. Carter wasn't known for kindness. He carried himself like he owned every room he entered. And when his eyes landed on Eleanor's booth, something in him decided it should be his. With an arrogant smile, he reached across her table, lifted her coffee cup, and tipped it downward. The liquid cascaded over her blouse, a dark stain spreading across the pale fabric. The cafe did not erupt in outrage. It froze. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Forks hovered above plates. What echoed louder than any protest was the silence, a silence so sharp it seemed to choke the air. Eleanor didn't cry out. She didn't plead. Her dignity, the same dignity that had carried her through decades of teaching unruly classrooms and weathering personal loss, became her shield. She sat still, coffee dripping onto the floor, her eyes fixed on Carter with quiet defiance. But someone else in the cafe could not remain silent. At a corner table sat Leo, a teenager with a second-hand camera slung around his neck. He wasn't a journalist, just a kid fascinated by capturing moments. His fingers trembled, his heart pounding with anger and disbelief, but he raised his camera and pressed record. Through his lens, he captured everything. Carter's smug face, Eleanor's silent strength, and, almost by accident, a photograph pinned to the bulletin board behind her booth. It was a portrait of Ridgeway's new police chief, Sam Hall. The caption beneath it read, "Proudly raised by Eleanor Hall." That detail, the connection between victim and chief, turned Leo's footage from a local scandal into a national flashpoint. The video went viral within hours. Clips spread across social media, carried by the hashtag #WatchYourCoffeeCop. To many, it was more than a petty act of cruelty. It was a symbol of everything ordinary people feared about unchecked power. The arrogance, the abuse, the sense that the rules didn't apply to those wearing a badge. Chief Sam Hall saw the video late that night. He watched in silence, his jaw tightening, his chest hollowing with cold fury. To him, it wasn't just a violation of law or dignity. It was personal. The woman humiliated in front of strangers was the one who had raised him, who had taught him integrity, who had instilled in him the belief that justice meant more than power. And now her name and face were everywhere, a silent victim turned unwilling symbol. Hall could have handled it quietly. He could have suspended Carter, issued a press release, and tried to contain the fire. But something deeper stirred in him. This wasn't just about his mother. It was about a system he now realized had protected men like Carter for far too long. The next morning, Hall went into the department's archives, a dusty basement filled with forgotten files and neglected records. For hours he combed through boxes, flipping through incident reports, complaints, and disciplinary files that had been quietly shelved. A pattern began to emerge. Carter wasn't the only one. There were others. Dozens of complaints buried under bureaucracy, testimonies from citizens ignored, patterns of misconduct brushed aside. It wasn't just one bad officer. It was a culture. A silence that stretched back years. Hall made a decision that would change his career and his town forever. He released a public statement, not only condemning Carter, but publishing a list of every officer currently under formal review. The move landed like a thunderclap. Some called it bravery. Others called it betrayal. His car was vandalized, the word traitor spray-painted across the doors. Anonymous threats filled his voicemail. The police union turned against him, branding him a danger to his own department. But the community, stirred by Eleanor's quiet dignity and Leo's unflinching lens, began to rally around him. Petitions circulated. Town meetings overflowed with voices demanding accountability. And slowly, a few honest officers within the department stepped out of the shadows, inspired by Hall's resolve. The spilled coffee had become more than a stain on a blouse. It was a spark, igniting a reckoning in Ridgeway. The town stood on the edge of transformation, teetering between division and reform. Families argued at dinner tables. Neighbors avoided each other in grocery store aisles. The fight for justice was tearing old alliances apart, even as it forged new ones. And through it all, Eleanor remained as she had always been, quiet, steady, dignified. She didn't give speeches or post online. She simply lived, a reminder that change often begins not with noise, but with stillness. Leo's video lived on, replayed millions of times. Each frame carried weight. The smirk of power unchecked, the strength of silent resistance. The accidental portrait of a mother behind her son's crusade. The story of the spilled coffee was no longer just about a woman and a cop. It was about a city forced to look at itself in the mirror, about how one small act of cruelty caught in a frame could ignite a fire that no one could put out. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, the silence had been broken. And this time, the world was listening. Your support means everything. If you liked the video, please subscribe and join us for more stories.